hard to explain. This one is pure fun. It's about
That's on video.
bugs, birds, and plants, my favorite topics. So we're just going to talk about some of the ones that live around here. Being a certified arborist doesn't really qualify me, especially for this class, but I've always loved nature, always paid attention to what's around. And I do believe that even as a professional nurseryman and certified arborist, that having a healthy ecosystem is one of the biggest advantages to having healthy plants and trees in the yard, and also growing them for commercial purposes. And when you have a balanced, healthy ecosystem, the pests that can cause a lot of problems always stay in check because everything's in balance. Nothing really can get to a point where they cause damage. And in a lot of ways, what we're going to talk about is butterflies and hummingbirds, and how to attract them, and what plants to grow to attract them. I broke it up into butterflies first and then hummingbirds, because with butterflies, we're going to talk about what plants the larvae, the caterpillars, eat, and then also what plants the adults could eat as far as nectar goes on flowers. And then with the hummingbirds, it's more just about what flowers attract them and what species live around here. So we'll get started with the first slide is a really good example of a yard that would attract hummingbirds and butterflies both, and for that matter have a very balanced ecosystem right there within your yard. And you can only worry about your own yard, but if everybody did something like this, or something that attracted wildlife and didn't kill wildlife with pesticides, that ecosystem can be very, very healthy even in an urban area. So if you notice, there's a cement or a pottery kind of water feature there on the left hand side.
She's gone.
That would attract both hummingbirds, butterflies, and all kinds of other wildlife that needs water in the desert. It's one of the most attractive features to any wildlife. So a little water feature like that could just be a bird bath that you fill up every day with the hose, or it could be something recirculating like that and make a nice sound in the yard and attract all kinds of wildlife. Other than that, lots of the plantings have flowers that attract butterflies and hummingbirds. And it's nice to plant plants that bloom throughout the year, some in the winter, some in the summer. And that way all year round, those animals have a food source of nectar and want to stick around. Other than that, shade is another important feature of this landscape. The big tree in the middle, that's what I would start with. If I had a bare backyard, just dirt, I would start with a couple really fast growing desert adapted trees like mesquites or palo verdes. And with those, you can quickly get shade and create a microclimate where all those little flowery things grow underneath then. So you can put lots of the delicate flowery stuff under the trees in pots or in the ground, but after those trees have maybe 4 or 5 years is all of growing really fast and getting established. Those kind of things is all you got to do really to keep a nice ecosystem in your yard and attract hummingbirds, butterflies, and much, much more. So let's get into first is butterflies and their host. So that's the thing with butterflies. There's a species of butterfly and their larvae eat only a certain kind of plant. And the adults usually eat different kinds of nectar, but they're very specific on what their caterpillars eat, their babies eat. So we'll talk about that first with the butterflies. So the first one, I think the most attractive, they're big, and are monarch butterflies. You hear about their migration story is amazing. It takes multiple generations to get from their northern reaches in Canada all the way to their southern reaches in Mexico. And it's just amazing that they can even do that. But there's so many mysteries of how the babies hatch kind of mid-journey and know where they're going still. And beyond that, I think they just try, I won't go into all that, but there's a whole lot of interest in monarchs. Their life cycle and their story is very, very interesting and very unique. But they do pass through Phoenix. You can get them to pass through Phoenix. They need food source, and what their larva eats is milkweed. There's a native species of milkweed called desert milkweed. It's probably the easiest to grow here. There's hardly any leaves on it. It's almost like sticks, but the flowers are attractive to the adults for nectar, and also the larva will eat the plant. There's lots of other kinds of milkweeds though. Butterfly milkweed is one that has prettier flowers, bigger leaves, more of attractive feature in a landscape maybe, but any kind of milkweed the larva will eat. and there is the larva on the left and the adult on the right. So the larva is, to pay attention a little bit, the larva has 2 antenna things on the front and 2 on the back, because we're going to see another butterfly real quick that a lot of people confuse with monarchs. But the difference, one of the main differences I've noticed, is in the larva and the amount of those black antenna things that they have. So these are monarchs, the caterpillar and the adult on a different kind of milkweed there. This one is called a queen butterfly, and they're much smaller. The plants that their larvae eat are the same. So their larvae eat milkweeds, anything in the milkweed family, but the adult butterfly is a little bit smaller, and they're orange, black, and white. I mean, their colors are very, very similar. I'm going to flip back quick to the monarch picture with the wings open the same way, and you can see there's much different pattern on there, kind of same colors but different pattern. So that's a monarch, that's a queen, and queens are smaller, as I said, and the larvae have 3 sets of those black antennas. So that's just a little bit of different. They're very similar. Queen butterflies honestly are much more common, and they're here year round. So usually you would find, if you see something that's kind of orange butterfly, probably is going to be a queen butterfly, but it could be a monarch too, and now you know the difference. But either way, if you have milkweed plants in your yard, that's what they'll be attracted to lay their eggs on, and their larvae will eat those milkweed plants. The adults eat many kinds of nectar. If you have lots of flowers around, especially little flowers, butterflies, any kind of butterfly loves to drink nectar out of flowers in general. There's an adult Gulf fritillaria butterfly. So there's more orange, little different pattern again, not hardly any white at all, but orange and black. And but these ones, you can definitely tell the difference when they close their wings. Those silver spots right there are shiny like a mirror, really, really unique in anything really. But the shiny spots, white, looks like white almost in the picture, but those white spots on the bottom of their wings when they close their wings up, those are really, really shiny like a mirror. And that's the way you tell Gulf fritillaria butterflies apart. Their food source that's an adult drinking nectar from a passion flower. The larvae only eat passion vine plant, leaf. So if you have passion vines around, you definitely will have Gulf fritillaria butterflies around. I can promise you that, because every time I've tried to grow passion vine here, they get eaten up by Gulf fritillaria larvae, which is fine. That's the thing about butterfly larvae, is they would never want to kill their host. So they can totally eat every leaf off of it. Then they turn into butterflies, go away, the plant comes back out and grows like nothing happened. So the cycle, like I say, it's a balanced ecosystem. The plants are made, the plants have adapted to deal with that stress of the caterpillars eating them, and the caterpillars would never want to kill their host, because then there would be nothing else to eat. So it's a very balanced cycle, and don't worry about it. But I would definitely expect your passion vine to get a little eaten up when you have one here in Phoenix. But the butterflies and the larvae, here's the larva. Larvas are unique too, little orange with black, almost like spikes on them. But there's one eating away at a passion vine leaf right there. So their passion vine in general, I'll talk a little bit more about. They grow very well here. They're almost all frost sensitive, right? So in the winter, if we get even to 30 degrees, 20 something especially, all the leaves would burn off from the cold in the night. They usually come back from the root if it's an established plant. So if you've had the plant 2-3 years before it gets its first hit of frost, you'll probably be fine. You can trim off all the dead in the spring around March when the chance of frost is over, and then they grow back. And they can survive that way. They also grow very, 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 very fast in warm weather. So if you do lose one in the winter, you buy another one in the spring, and it'll cover a 20-foot of fence in one summer, with vine. And they prefer a little shade, honestly. Full sun especially with the summers that we've been having, hotter and hotter, it seems like, they would prefer a little shade under a tree, up against the wall on the east side of a house would be a perfect spot for them. east side of the house because the house itself shades it in the afternoon. A little bit of morning sun and then afternoon shade. If you got a side yard like that or something, you could put them on a trellis up against the house on the east side of the house. Would be perfect. Or if your backyard faced east, for example, or front yard faced east, you could put them on the east side of the house either way. That would be a perfect spot for them. Also, if they grow up against the house, it'll protect them from frost. Anything growing really close to your house is protected from frost in the winter, much more than any kind of frost blanket or Christmas lights or any of the other ways people try to protect plants from frost. Having something up against your house is probably the best way to protect it. No one likes to think about how much heat their house is losing in the nighttime, but it's proof right there. Pretty much anything I've ever had close to the house has survived even hard freezes here. So that would be the perfect place to grow passion vine if you want. And look at all these varieties, just the varieties of flowers and fruit. Not all varieties fruit, but there is some that make a really good fruit, like you get passion fruit drinks and things like that. It is the pulp of the fruit that they flavor those drinks with. So that, and I've seen many people get lots of fruit here in Phoenix off of a passion vine. The varieties that are made for fruiting, they can produce a lot of fruit here right in our climate too. So that's a good one to have around, good one to play around with for all kinds of reasons. Next one, black swallowtail butterfly. So these I've always seen on rue. If anybody's ever grown rue, it's a medicinal herb. It's a really strong smell, but these caterpillars love it. And dill and fennel, probably a little more common. People grow in garden situations. Parsley, the caterpillar eats all those things. And this is an adult, which is pretty common, where the adult feeds on the flowers of the same plant that the larva eats the leaves of. So this is an adult black swallowtail butterfly drinking nectar from the little flowers of a dill plant. So these plants, we'll talk about growing the plants too here in a minute. Let me go through the other slides of the butterfly. There is the caterpillar, black swallowtail larva. And watch this. Boop, out of his head pops two little orange things. They say they smell bad. Honestly, I've never gotten close enough. I've scared them enough where the orange things pop out. It's like a defense mechanism. So if they get scared, the orange things pop out of their head. And they're supposed to have a scent on them. Like I say, I've never, maybe I need to get a little closer. But I haven't noticed a real strong scent. But it definitely looks weird when the orange things pop out of their head, from going like this, nothing, to those things popping out. And then let's talk about the plants. So the plants that black swallowtail are attracted to lay their eggs on and have their larvae eat are very easy to grow from seed. All of them are winter annuals here. The rue can be year-round. The rue can be all year round. If you want to keep them more year-round, that's the one to plant. And you can find rue in 4-inch in the herbs. All these would be in the herb section. You can find all of them in the herb section of the nursery. The only one I would buy as a plant would be the rue. The other ones I would buy seed. Dill seed, fennel seed, parsley seed, even. It's all very easy to grow from seed. You can start it in little 4-inch pots in a windowsill just until it sprouts. If you're worried about it drying out outside, or bugs or birds eating it outside, it's a little safer way to get it going. And then once it gets a little bigger, if there's a bunch of them, you can divide them up and transplant them outside. Or if there's only a few in the pot, you can transplant the whole 4-inch pot out into the ground. Once you get them going, though, all those ones from seed, like I say, the rue, you would buy a plant, take it home, plant on the ground, like a regular lantana or something. The other ones, they reseed themselves. And that means, like this dill flower, for example, if you let that flower, it's attracting all kinds of beneficial insects, the butterflies. It goes to seed, so the whole head will be full of seed. And if you let that mature and fall back on the ground, as long as you water that spot often, it'll come up over and over again until it gets hot. And then it'll sit there dormant all summer. And then if you keep that spot moist in the fall, they come back up. So all those plants are really fun to have around. I've had dill and parsley just come up every winter because I grew it there last year in that spot and I let it go to seed. So they can naturalize, is what they call that almost. So if you have a nice spot with pretty good garden soil and you just let these things go to, let them flower for sure, and then let them go to seed, and then keep that spot moist, they will sprout and grow again over and over and over again. They're easy to have around. Plus they're edible. All of them can be used in the kitchen too. Okay, so giant swallowtail. Remember the last one was black swallowtail, and giant swallowtail is a whole different host. The citrus trees, any kind of citrus, doesn't really matter. But the other ones ate like annual herbs, and this one eats citrus trees. So even though they're both swallowtail, the giant swallowtail has a much different host, and that is citrus trees. Sorry, they're also by the name giant swallowtail. They're much bigger, kind of the same color. Here, I'll switch back to the other one. Kind of the same coloration, but much bigger. So that is a giant swallowtail butterfly. The most unique thing is its caterpillar. What's that look like? They have a very unique camouflage adaptation, and they look like bird poop is their trick. That's their trick. They sit there eating away at citrus leaves all day long, and if you walk by fast, you'd think, what's eating my citrus tree? All I see is bird poop all over, and that's their camouflage, and it works. Seems to work pretty good because they stick around, and if you have citrus trees, again, they're never going to hurt your citrus trees so bad that it would make them not make fruit or even make them look ugly. Really, I mean, I've never seen them knock all the leaves off a citrus tree. You just see eaten leaves here and there, some that look weird like that one in the photo, chewed off on the ends a little bit. And these have the same adaptation for defense too, those two orange horns that come out when they get scared. So if you were to squeeze it a little bit or something, or flick the leaf it's on, those orange things pop out of its head. So all kinds of defense mechanisms here, and a big, beautiful butterfly too. So all you got to do is have citrus trees around, and citrus trees are one of the most, I would say, the most rewarding fruit trees to have in Phoenix. I'll go back to that because, you know, I grow any kind of fruit tree I can find and see if it grows here. And a lot of them, unfortunately, don't. I've had some live a couple years until a hard freeze, or I've had some live a couple years until a really hot summer. And there's so many kinds of fruit trees out there, tropical fruit trees, temperate trees like peaches and pears and apples and all that. And honestly, if you just want a lot of fruit, citrus is the easiest to grow here in our climate. It's made for our climate. It's from a climate exactly like ours. It is just the most rewarding, easiest way to get lots of fruit and giant swallowtail butterflies at the same time. So there's a whole lot more information on citrus. The the University of Arizona has a lot of documents on their website about how to grow citrus. There's a citrus clinic, they call it. The University of Arizona puts on a citrus clinic all about citrus. You can go to their farm where they grow new varieties and try the fruit and get information and go to classes. And there's one of those on the west side of town and one of those on the east side of the town every year. So learn more about citrus if you don't have any. It's a wonderful plant to have around, and learn more about it and get one in if you don't have one. So now we're into hummingbirds. I think hummingbirds are so interesting to watch. I put a feeder outside my window. I try to have flowers that they're attracted to in my yard that bloom all year round. Now, I would say the general rule on hummingbirds is they love tubular flowers. You know, they got that long beak, beak that they can get into the center of flowers where the bees can't get that nectar. So they've got their own little niche there where the bees are getting nectar from all the flat flowers, little flowers, all that. So those long tube flowers are kind of made for them so that only they can get the nectar out of the bottom of it. And so it's like, we'll talk about all these plants that attract hummingbirds, but there is, I'll try to remember to talk about what season they bloom in, because that's important to have some in the summer, some in the winter, spring, fall. So they're always around. But a hummingbird feeder, I'll give it a little cheater in the beginning here. I love having a hummingbird feeder around. I hang it right in front of my window, in my living room, outside my living room window. And honestly, I find myself watching a show that's not that interesting, and my eyes are veering out the window watching hummingbirds around the feeder instead of what I'm supposed to be, or what I'm trying to watch on TV. They're just interesting to watch. They're, especially when you get more than one going at it, and they're back and forth, and their behavior and their beauty all just makes them, it's like a fish tank almost or something, you know. It's just pretty and interesting to watch. So let's get into how to attract them and what plants do it. Now, first I'll talk about the species that are around here, and Anna hummingbirds are the most common. If you see a hummingbird first time, it's probably going to be one of these Anna hummingbirds. They're the most common. Remember, with hummingbirds, the males have the pretty throat usually. If they're gonna, the male does, and the female is usually just kind of same shape and size, but dull, no neck color. So Anna's is the most common, and they're here year round. And like I say, they're here at my hummingbird feeder all the time. They're the most common one. Beautiful pink like that on their throat. A more rare one that I have seen here, is the Costa hummingbirds. They're much more rare, but man, their neck thing flares out like a beard or a mustache almost on the sides, and it's dark purple like that. If you haven't seen one, just start attracting more and more to your yard, and hopefully one will come around. A family of them, maybe make a nest. The nests are real interesting in hummingbirds too. They make them with spider webs and little fine particles of fiber, and they glue them onto branches. So the little tiny nest, it looks like a bowl, like somebody made a clay bowl and like cemented it to the branch. And they breed in anything around here. I find them in my citrus tree, my lime tree is where I've found so many hummingbird nested. I think they like that it's thorny and really full and stickly, and other animals can't get in there to get their babies. So nesting sites is another thing. Well, I'm going to talk a lot about what nectar flowers attract hummingbirds, but I'll say quickly that if you want them to nest in your yard and breed in your yard, it's having kind of really stickly, dense, thorny, if possible, branches on a little bit taller bush, you know, or tree. That's where they love making a nest. Really anywhere. If you have a good ecosystem in your yard, lots of shade, lots of thick branches and protection, they'll nest in your yard. But so the Costa's less common, but beautiful, even more so a little bit. Maybe just because they're rare is why I think that, but they definitely are beautiful, and you can find them around. The black-chinned hummingbird. Honestly, I've never seen one here. They migrate through here, but maybe in the questions or something, or just comments, tell me if you've seen one. I'd be interested. I would not call myself a birder. I love birds, but I haven't dedicated the time that some have to finding some of these things. So it'd be interesting to know. I put it in the PowerPoint, but I gotta admit it was all on like internet search, you know. So it said they go through here on their migration, and it'd be interesting to see if somebody's seen one. And if not, keep an eye out. So Rufous hummingbird, another migratory one. That again I have never seen. Same story about the last one, but this one is the same. Then we're going to talk about the plants. That's kind of my specialty, and they're all attracted to the same nectar. So that'll be coming up quick. But if you, again, same thing. If you've seen a Rufous hummingbird around on their migration, make a comment or tell me in the questions. It'd be interesting too. Okay, so native or adapted plants, very important. I don't recommend, you know, there's so many plants in the world that attract hummingbirds, and not all of them grow here. And remember, just because you can buy a plant here doesn't mean it grows here. Many plants are moved all over the country all the time, from Southern California, from Florida, places where those plants would grow so much better. And they ship them here, throw them on the ground, hope to sell them before they die. And that's when you end up buying something that wasn't really ever made to grow here. And then people wonder why it died. They think it was something they did wrong. They buy another one, try it again, kill it too. So just remember, just because it's for sale here doesn't mean it grows here. And so that's why I talk a lot about native or adapted plants. I mean, there's a very small list of plants that are truly native, and native also, you got to draw the line at like native to Phoenix, native to Arizona, native to the Southwest, which does that go into Mexico, into Sonora? I mean, you got to draw a line somewhere. So to me, adapted plants is a real good word. It means anything that grows well here. It could be from Australia. Lots of plants we grow from Australia because it has a similar climate in parts of Australia, South Africa, South America. There's a whole lot of desert climates in the world, and we bring in plants from all of them because they're adapted to our climate and they grow well here. So here's a few of my favorites that I promise grow well here. We grow thousands and thousands of them, and I see them thrive in not only my yard, but everybody else's too. So they are these particular ones are not only adapted to our desert climate, but they have blooms that attract hummingbirds and butterflies. The first one would be Chuparosa. I have all these. You'll notice they have Chuparosa is the common name, and that's the common name most common to our region. You know, if you went to Mexico or somewhere else, they would have a different common name. Justicia californica is its scientific name. Might seem hard to remember that, but if you really want to search something or find out more about it, the scientific name is everybody in the world would call it that. It has the same name all over the world. That's why usually in the trade we use more scientific names, because there's no confusion about somebody saying, well, where I'm from they call it this, or where I'm from they call it that. So that's how these will all go. First one's a common name, second one's a scientific name. Either one here would probably come up on a search. But Chuparosa. You'll notice a bunch of the next ones are all the same family, Justicia, because they all have flowers that attract hummingbirds and butterflies. Chuparosa is one that's very adapted to our climate. And when it blooms, which is usually like spring, but man, it is like, it has so many flowers on it, you can't see the plant anymore. Just like a giant ball of red flowers. Here's a close up of the flower. There's that long tube like they're all going to have, so the hummingbirds can reach that nectar down deep in it where the bees can't. So there's the flower of a Chuparosa. The one thing I'll say about Chuparosa is if you have a lot of traffic in the yard or a dog, I wouldn't get one, only because they're so fragile. I mean, the wind doesn't really do it. They're adapted to dealing with that. But if people are brushing by with their legs all the time, kids, dogs, whatever, it's like right on a walkway maybe, I would avoid it, just because they're very, very brittle. I've grown many beautiful 5-gallon plants and try to pick it up to sell it, and the whole thing cracks off and you're left with a little stump of a trunk. They grow back from the root every time, but they're very brittle, I guess. And don't think I'm putting deterring you from buying a plant when I tell you what the problem with it is. I just see them all. The beauty is obvious. You can tell a lot for yourself. So if there is anything that's kind of a drawback, I'll tell you about that for sure, just so you know what you're getting into. None of them mean don't use them. It just means that I just like to tell people the good and the bad. The good's usually obvious. The bad is something that most people wouldn't know without working with the plant for a lot of years. So I'll try to share that when I can. And so summer bloomer, basically, from early spring, sometimes if it warms up quick, through the summer. Another one that can bloom in cycles almost all year round if the frost doesn't get it. Oh, that's another thing. All these Justicia, the Chuparosa, and this, and the next one, they're a little bit frost sensitive. So they come back again, but the top can freeze off in the winter if it gets in the 20s. But this one, basically the same thing. The plant's a little bit lower. It loves the shade. If you have a shady area, a much bigger leaf. If you want something a little juicier looking, fluffy, when it doesn't have flowers on it. This one has, the flower show is a little less intense, but more often. So it's you get flowers more often, but you can see a lot of leaf when they're blooming, and then the periodic flowers blooming through it. Blooms more often. The leaf is much bigger. Shorter plant a little bit, sprawls along the ground about 2 feet high, and then to the sides. I've seen it used in a little bit more shady areas, and it does wonderfully. Can handle full sun a little bit throughout the day. wouldn't hurt it, but it'd be nice to have a little break in the afternoon, like afternoon shade. The other one, tuberosa, full sun. Out in the blasting full sun heat is fine. There's the close-up flower of the Mexican honeysuckle. Sorry, I didn't say the name of that one. The orange flowered one here is Mexican honeysuckle. Another Justicia, Spicegira. And then Mexican honeysuckle flower up close. Or same, looks same almost, except for you could see those big juicy leaves right behind it, and the flower's orange instead of red. There's another Justicia candicans, and this is flame honeysuckle. This one is not so full in the leaf department. Littler leaves like that are usually, if you let it grow naturally, is a little sparse. But again, the flowers are bigger than tuberosa, and they bloom more often than tuberosa. So that's for flowers. The plant, like I say, is a little thin. You want like more of a natural looking landscape to put them in. The other problem I've had with this one is they get real tall and skinny and fall over. So I would just, it's not a problem. You just trim them often. And when you trim them, you lose the flowers. So you'd wait till the flowers bloom. And as they're starting to fade, then you chop it in half or chop it down to maybe 6 inches. And then the whole thing comes back and does it again. And it handles full sun. It would grow better with a little shade like anything here, but it'll handle full sun too. I would not do the chop back if it's burning hot. I'd try to cut it back after it blooms in the spring before it gets too hot. And then again, if it gets ugly in the summer, I would kind of hold off to cut it back until right about now, 1st of October or something like that. So, and if you cut it back often, they get fuller and denser and fuller. And like I say, that's its problem, is getting a little thin and scraggly and falling over. So it just takes some trimming in the spring and fall probably to keep it full. It's my favorite. Red yucca, if you want a plant that's like bulletproof and you don't have to ever think about it again, and then get those flowers on it all through the spring and summer, red yucca, and honestly, I'm not the only one that thinks that, because it's probably our #1 seller in accents. We've sold, this has been popular since I can remember, and I've been doing nursery for 25 years, and it was like #1 when I started, and it's #1 today. Other agaves and aloes and everything comes up and goes sometimes, and this one just stays. It's like it doesn't get cold enough to ever harm it here. It doesn't get hot enough to hurt it here. Nothing hurts it. Full sun is fine. It loves full sun, better in full sun. And it has that grassy leaf with no thorn. So compared to an agave with really sharp thorns, it's soft and fluffy. Compared to a grass that has like clumping grasses that look like that, need a lot of water, and this thing hardly doesn't need any water. It needs very infrequent deep soaks. You could almost water it with the hose once a month if you wanted to, if it was established and a little bit bigger and well rooted. And so fluffy, looks like a grass, but much hardier. And grasses, you have to chop them off once a year to make them come back somewhat green, and they don't live very many years when you do that. So red yuccas just have the best of every other kind of plant. And then you get these flowers that attract hummingbirds. So all those red flowers, have a close up? No. All those little red flowers are tubes like the other ones. You can get them in yellow. If you look around at nurseries, you can get red yuccas with a yellow flower. Hesperalo parviflora with a yellow flower. If you want a combination, if you already got a couple red, you can mix it up with a yellow one. And they are just the easiest plant to attract hummingbirds, and also just have in the yard something nice and fluffy looking. So that's I don't have anything bad to say about that one. You know what's bad to say about that one is how a lot of people prune them. They try to prune them like a grass and get their hedger out and like round them off or something, and it just looks horrible. The next little leaves that come out, they break that round form of a ball that they've shaped them into, and now they're looking scraggly. The way you trim these is when the flower stalks get dead, you follow them down into the middle of the plant and you cut them out with one pair of pruners, and you go all the way down inside the plant and you snip off just the one dead leaf or the one dead flower stalk, one by one by one by one. That's why, I mean, that one's going to need about 15, 20 cuts to get rid of them flower stalks when they die. And I think that's why people do it with the hedger, just because it's one swipe and you're done. But man, they come back. When you do it with pruners, you can't tell that anything's been done. They're back to beautiful the next minute. When you do it with a hedger, you ruin the shape of them forever. So That's a trick on that. But other than that, man, I love them. Aloes is one of my favorites. Maybe the aloes. People are familiar with aloe vera. I think most people have heard of aloe vera. Aloes. They're all there's a bunch of species of aloe. Aloe vera being this one, Aloe barbadensis. Medicinal aloe. The original medicinal aloe has yellow flowers like that, and it's a big, hefty plant that does not make as many babies. Makes a lot of babies, but not as many as the orange flowered version of the same thing. So when you get aloe vera, you could be getting orange flower or yellow flower. If you care, I would ask and try to find somebody who knows which one you're buying if they're not marked. The yellow is hardier, much hardier to cold and heat. It gets a little bigger and it does not make as many pups, babies on the sides. The orange one, the orange flowered aloe vera, is a little smaller, a little bit more sensitive to cold and heat, and it makes tons and tons and tons of babies. So many that when you put them in a pot, usually they crack the pot open on their own and fall over and keep growing like nothing happened. They're very hardy to drought. What they're not hardy to is hard freezes and full sun. So I love aloes. I collect aloes myself because there is thousands of species of aloes, not just aloe vera. There's aloes that grow into trees and aloes that grow into bigger clumps with like all different color flowers. And some have really pretty leaves. Some are so tiny that you could keep them in a pot forever on a windowsill. And some are, like I say, giant trees. I love the variety in aloes. So aloes are all from Africa. They're all from different parts of Africa. None of them are native to the Americas, but they grow really well here in our climate if you give them a little shade and keep them on the dry side, especially in the summer. You would think you got to water them a lot. But if they're in the shade, you can keep them on the dry side in the summer and a little bit of frost protection in the winter. So usually whatever's giving them shade in the summer, like a tree or a porch, would also give them frost protection in the winter. And that's all you need. And they're just wonderful plants to have around. And I like them so much better than agaves because if you think about the structural design feature in your yard, there's agaves and there's aloes. Really, agaves would love a little shade too. A lot of them stress really hard in the full sun. So you got the same requirements. This little plant looks kind of the same. But an agave grows through its life cycle, blooms, and then the center plant dies, and you got to wait for the babies to grow. But the cycle of it makes them hard to grow. And aloes, they bloom every year, every single spring, winter, really, all through the winter and spring. You get different kinds of aloes are blooming. Aloe vera will start blooming in the middle of winter and go all the way until kind of early summer. So here's one attracts hummingbirds, but in the winter. That Hesperaloe, the last one, the red yucca, blooms all summer. This one blooms all winter. So here's two right there. If you had aloes kind of in the shady parts of your yard, under trees or on the porch, and red yuccas out in the full sun yard, you'd have these kind of flowers for hummingbirds all year round. And so that's all about aloes. And there's a little nice picture of a tree aloe. That one, they get big, a lot bigger. There's species that get way bigger than that. Beautiful flower shows. This one's red like that. And there's just endless varieties that you could collect. Remember this for a question that might later come up. My collection of aloes is growing every week, it seems like, but I keep them in pots on my porch. I used to have flowers on my porch, like you buy in 6-packs, annual flowers in pots along the porch. I have a wraparound porch, 3 sides of the house are porch, so it's kind of endless. And to keep it looking good, I used to have all these little flowers, but I would have to water twice a day in the summer just to barely keep them alive. And we started with the hose, and then I tried to hook up an automatic system, and it was just lots of water waste and lots of trouble, and switching them out twice a year. So I got the idea that my aloe collection was out with the 6-packs of color and in with the aloe collection. And it just works perfectly. I keep them all in pots, pretty glazed pots, with all my different kinds of aloes, big, little, yellow flower, red flower, orange flower, they all bloom all through the winter, and I can see them out the windows of my house, and hummingbirds come to drink nectar from them while they're blooming in the winter. So I love having aloes around, and there's endless if you like collecting certain kinds of plants or whatever, aloes is a really fun one. And mine is in pots on my porch. Is a perfect environment. The porch shades them in the summer and doesn't let them freeze in the winter. So that's that. And fairy dusters is another one that hummingbirds and bees. This one bees loves too. But if for pollinators and hummingbirds and butterflies, they just produce a lot of nectar. They're really pretty. Those flowers, you can't really see how big they are in the scale, but the biggest ones I've seen are about ping pong ball size. How about that? A little bigger than a quarter, an inch and a quarter, inch and a half in diameter is big flowered ones. And they vary a lot. We grow them from seed, so some have a little bigger flowers, some don't. There is two main varieties. Native fairy duster on the right has a pink flower. The flower is not, to me, not as bright. How about that? It could be attractive. It's attractive to bees and hummingbirds all the same. But to me, it's not quite that bright flower show. But just so you know, the native one handles any kind of cold we could get here in Phoenix. I've seen it go through really, really hard freezes. It's native. And the other one, Baja fairy duster, it's from Baja California, where they don't get frost, and it does on a really, really hard freeze in the winter, which we've had before in the teens, even maybe early 20s. You might lose one of those. So grow them both, grow one or the other, either way, but that way you know what you're getting into. So the native ones are much hardier. The flowers not quite as, the flowers like that, light pink. And then the Baja fairy duster is like got that dark red flower and a little frost sensitive is all. Both of them deal with heat very well. Full sun, bloom all through the summer. Mine's had flowers on it all summer long. The native one can go almost dormant in the winter. I think that's how it handles the cold well, is it can lose all of its leaves and be bald through the winter if it does freeze, and then just comes back in the spring. So no problem at all. The Baja fairy duster stays green through the winter, but again, if it gets real cold, you can lose them. There is varieties out there that claim to be red flowered and cold hardy. I'm trying a few in my yard now, but I haven't had a hard freeze to prove it with. We'll see. So, but it could be, it's a combination, a hybrid between the native one and the Baja one that has red flowers, but it has the little tiny leaves and seems to have the hardiness of the native one. So keep an eye out. But when you're looking for them, have them all. One of each is fine. They're very easy to grow, pretty tall shrub, 3-4. The Baja one will get to 4 or 5 feet, and the native is a little bit shorter, sprawly on the ground. But they both are just wonderful plants to have in the landscape here, and they attract all kinds of pollinators, hummingbirds and butterflies, and have a pretty flower show all summer long. That's a fairy duster, and fairy duster, the Baja fairy duster, when it's really full of flowers. The picture, I think, is a little fuzzy, unfortunately, but it goes to show that when they're lit up with flowers, they can be very, very impressive, eye-catching. Okay, here's definitely a native plant. It's a little bigger, thorny, something that you wouldn't put in every yard, but if you have kind of a desert theme, it's a beautiful accent, kind of almost centerpiece it could be to a beautiful desert landscape. This is at its best. Leaves, flowers, the whole thing. They go through cycles of being like thorny sticks with no leaves or flowers on them, and then, which is the way you'll buy them if you buy one. And then as they get healthier and healthier, they, especially during the monsoon rainstorm, seems to be kind of what triggers them. It'll get humid and rain, and then they'll puff out leaves and the flowers will start coming out. So a summer bloomer for sure. But you can have them just be a beautiful centerpiece in a yard. And they are hard to establish, is probably what I would say is the challenge to them. Usually when you find them, they're bare root, which means they found that. So you can, if you get permission from the government, almost like if you're a hunter, it's like a deer tag, or like you get permission and they give you a tag, you can pull them out of the desert in certain areas. You know, they get a lot from Texas. They're native to all the whole Southwest. So different people who do this for a living, get permission to dig them out of the desert and then bring them to nurseries. And usually nurseries set them up in an area where they're little stubbed off, chopped off roots that they cut off to get them out of the ground is all that's left, and then the sticks. And they're very capable of living through that. At the nursery, usually you squirt them off with the hose every once in a while, keep them hydrated. Be very careful when you buy one that it's alive. They look the same when they're dead as they do when they're alive. The way to do it is if you grab a thorn with your fingers and bend it sideways, the thorns bend real easy sideways, and it'll either crack open and be bright green and juicy underneath that thorn, or it'll just fall off in your hand and be dead and hollow underneath it. But do that down by the base, almost to the roots, wherever you can find a thorn that you can turn sideways like that, or have the nurseryman do it to prove that they're alive, just to make sure that it's a fresh batch that just came in. And what you do is you take that fresh, nice, juicy one, you take it home, you dig the hole that it fits in, and because there's so little root and so much top, sometimes they'll want to fall over. Try to bury it good and pack the dirt real tight around the roots, and you only want to bury it as deep as it was. You can see the color on the trunk. They'll be like white. Everything that was underground in the wild, it'll be white, and everything that was above ground in the wild will be black. So you bury it at the same level, flat, horizontal with your ground. If it seems like it's going to fall over in the wind or something, you might need one stake on one side and like a tie. And this is all temporary. You water it one really, really, really good time. Leave the hose soaking on it for a couple hours. You can do it with the hose on kind of fast, like a blaster, and wash all the root. Make sure the soil is compacted and goes into all the cracks underneath the roots and really surrounds the roots good with no air pockets. Leave the hose dripping on it for a couple hours at least. Make a really big wet spot, 3-4 feet wet spot, and soak it in for 2 hours. Do not water it again until you see leaves pop out. Don't put the drip emitter on it. They need to dry out at that point. The roots, you have to wet it the one time to pack the soil and for the roots to follow out into that moist soil. But you don't water it again until you see leaves pop out. It could take 6 months. It could take a year before the leaves pop out. In the meantime, remember that you should probably squirt off the sticks just a little bit, not so it puddles a whole bunch at the ground. A little bit of puddle doesn't matter, but squirt off the sticks maybe once every 2 weeks to help them keep hydrated until the roots come back out. But no water at the base, no drip emitters. If you do all that, you got a pretty good chance that they'll live through the process. If you want to avoid that giant long story, you can buy them rooted in a pot. Usually they're much smaller, little tiny ones you can buy rooted in a 5-gallon. Those you would plant like anything. You dig the hole, you'd carefully get them out of the pot and try to preserve all the root they have, put them in the ground, water them real good, and then you can continue watering them, not with a drip emitter still, but you'd deep soak them every 2 weeks, every once a month maybe, and you have a much, much better chance of having that survive the process. But you got to start with usually a smaller one then. That's the long story on ocotillos. But very beautiful centerpiece to any desert yard, and not as common because they are a little challenging, honestly. But you get one going. I've seen some yards with a beautiful big one right in the middle, cactus, agaves, aloes all around it, and things like that, and just, man, impressive. So that's the flower up close. And hummingbirds just love them. The same, that tube flower that they love. Penstemon. Penstemon is honestly, just to keep your expectations down, I would call it a winter annual here. You can buy a 1 gallon in the fall, like right now, put them in, and they will thrive and bloom all winter long, all spring long, even into June. They're beautiful. It's just really hard to get them through July and August and September. So if they've died on you before, don't feel bad. If you've kept one through the summer, good for you. It's possible. In the shade is probably the best situation. But you could also look at this just like a once a year thing. You go out and buy your penstemons in the fall, enjoy them all winter long. You can put them in pots. You can put them in the ground. You can put them in full sun in the winter. You can't put them in full sun in the summer. So there it is with penstemon, but they come in all colors, purple, red, pink, you know, and hummingbirds love them. And beautiful small plants, you know, not a whole lot of commitment. You got like a foot or two, 2 by 2 would be a big patch of penstemon, and bloom after bloom after bloom. Another trick on this is if you deadhead them like roses, like when a flower stalk gets kind of fizzled out, if you cut them off, more come back and more come back. A little bit smaller. Each wave gets a little shorter, but they get more and more flowers. If you leave the dead stalks on them, they tend to be done and maybe set some seed and stop blooming. So if you put these things in now and trim the dead flowers off when they're spent, you just keep getting more and more and more flowers all the way until I would say the heat kills them in August or whatever. So the easy way to do it is that. But that's penstemon. And of all these things we've talked about, there's a tree. Most of them were low shrubs, you know, or accents. The ocotillo is about the tallest thing I've talked about so far. This is a real tree, not a big tree, which I hope as time goes on, more and more, as yards get smaller and smaller, I hope that people start buying smaller and smaller trees to match. I see way too many, you know, tiny little yards with a shade tree that's going to get 50 feet wide. And you know what? The neighbor that's 10 feet away also has a tree that's going to get 50 feet wide. And I see all these brand new neighborhoods, or even neighborhoods that are 5, 10 years old. And it just, some of these trees got to go. And I hate to see it happen. I mean, I love trees, and I can see the future in those cases. And they just, all these feuds with neighbors and cement getting cracked from the roots going underneath it. And there's all these giant shade trees that we commonly use because they grow fast. That's why people use them, I think. But this is a beautiful flowering shade tree that only gets about 20 feet tall and 20 feet wide. Beautiful. I would say if it was me, I would pick a multiple trunked version, which, let me see, there we go. So this is a multiple trunk tree. If you're not familiar with our desert trees and the shapes that they naturally grow in, it's kind of like if you're from another part of the country where trees have a long skinny stick and a ball on top. This is the ball on top. It's just sitting on the ground, which is a much more structurally sound way for a tree to grow here in the desert. You know, trees that grow tall and skinny, it's because they grow in a forest and they're trying to reach for the sunlight. Plenty of sunlight here in the desert. There's no need for that at all. What they need to do is be wide and low and shade the ground underneath them to stay cool. And multiple trunk trees are much more adapted to our desert heat than a lollipop shaped tree that you would normally, I think in your mind that, well, that's the way a tree is supposed to look. So kind of, if you have to, open your mind to multiple trunk trees, smaller trees for our smaller yards, if that's your particular situation. And after all that, this one attracts hummingbirds on top of it. So same tube trumpet flower like that. They also this tree's come a long way. When we first started growing them 25 years ago, we grew them from seed. They'd have white, some would come with white flowers, some would have pink, some purple, some all over the place with flowers. And the growth pattern was short, real short, and sprawly. I mean, you get trees that would grow sideways more than up for sure. And so, and also seed pods galore. They make this long brown thing look like a green bean, like a brown bean, and thousands of them would cover these trees. And so obviously with all that, with that sales pitch, they weren't the best of sellers back then. But nurseries have found varieties with prettier flowers, found varieties that grow upright and fast. And now we have these and less seed pods. So upright growth, pretty dark colored flowers, and low seed pod production. And so now this tree is, if you go to any nursery now, chances are you'll find one of the good ones. You can buy it in the summer with flowers on it, just to be sure. But it's a very, very good tree. Desert willow tree, they bloom all summer long. They do lose their leaves in the winter, which a lot of people think, oh no, I don't want the mess. Remember, if a tree loses its leaves all at once in the winter, it'll be much, much cleaner the rest of the year. So trees that have leaves all year long lose leaves all year long. Just remember that. So this one loses all of them around Thanksgiving, around the first freeze. All the leaves fall off. You blow them all up, clean them up, and the rest of the year it's very clean. Flowers, they fall. You do get flower drop through the summer, but that's it. The other advantage to having a tree that loses its leaves in the winter, remember, is for solar gain on your house. If you get, once it finally gets big enough to kind of shade at least one side of your house or a little bit over the roof, you can get shade in the summer. And then in the winter, when you want the sun to be hitting that wall or that window of your house, the leaves fall off and you get sun through it. So don't be scared by the deciduous, by the leaf loss in the winter. It's a beautiful tree, wonderful tree, attracts hummingbirds, and it's specific to our region of the Southwest too. You know, it's like something characteristic of the Southwest that you could not grow in, you know, other more colder climates, things like that. And that's it. So, Katie, are you back? Do we have questions built up, or?
Let's see.
Hello.
Hi. So
Hi.
I only saw one comment, and that was from Deb, and she said we have a pair of black-chinned and rufous at our feeders all day long.
Really? All year long too? Can you put up your mic, Deb?
Deb's still here. Let me see.
Both, huh? So black-chinned and rufous. Is she still here?
She's still here. Deb, do you want to? I don't know.
Tell me more. Can you maybe is your mic? I can't see everybody's microphone.
Yeah, let's see.
Yeah, you'll have to unmute your microphone, bottom left corner usually.
In the meantime, Karen Klein says, I have verdin and finches that eat at the base of flowers on some of my trees. Does this kill the blooms?
What was the last part? Does this kill what?
The blooms?
Oh, probably. But shouldn't hurt the tree at all. But that particular flower might wilt and fade after that.
Any other questions? At this point, anybody can unmute themselves and ask directly if you like.
Yeah, please. Like I say, I love questions because it also teaches me a lot about the same topic. You know, everybody's had their experience.
Jonathan, this is Karen Klein again.
Hi.
They are eating, like on my Mexican honeysuckle and those types that the hummingbirds love. Before they open up, they poke a hole right at the base. Their beak is not long enough. So am I not going to get any blooms from that?
No, I mean, you should. There shouldn't be nectar in them until they finally open up. So you get lots of buds. The plant would still try to produce flowers normally. So you'll still, like, the plant won't try to stop trying to make flowers. So it'll make buds, make flowers. The flowers that they do poke a hole in the bottom, I know what you mean. They've figured out a way to cheat and get that nectar that should be just for hummingbirds. But I guess good for them. But that flower that they eat the bottom off probably will wilt then.
Right. Okay.
But I mean, that's at a point where they're almost, the buds are pretty by themselves, and by the time they open is when they would finally find nectar in there to chew on, to get out. And by then the flower's a couple days from being over anyway. So I mean,
yeah.
And those birds usually are, what did you say, verdin and what?
The finches.
Yeah, well, the finches are not, but the verdins are usually more, there's not very many of them, right? There's like one or two in them.
No, I have a lot because I put out Oreo feeders, so they eat my oranges, they eat the jelly, so I have all the time.
Okay, so they do, yeah. I mean, I don't know. You'll just have to see if there's so many. But no, I mean, it definitely would. The plant's going to keep trying no matter what. So,
Right, yeah.
I mean, for all I know, a little bit of damage like that might even make it produce more flowers. I don't know. But it's possible. It's possible. Like when you trim things, sometimes it makes more shoots come out from the trimming.
Right.
So maybe, I mean, that's a long shot. But if nothing else, you should be able to enjoy the flowers, enjoy the birds, and everybody.
Yeah, I love the verdants. They're so sweet.
Yeah. Yeah, good.
I did have the rufuses when they migrated, but I don't have any now. I don't know who the other person.
Tell me what time of year they come through, or more or less, winter, summer, or what?
Well, it'd be like September because they go way to Alaska for the summer.
Wow.
So I had them migrating through. I've only been here since April, so they came back through in September.
Okay.
But I haven't seen any for a while. But I have so many, I'm very bad at knowing what I'm seeing.
We enjoy them all, right? Whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good. Thanks for the info. I'll have to write that down.
So Deb, who talked about the hummingbirds, she says she doesn't have a mic. But she says we hung our first feeder in February this year and have had both pairs of hummingbirds ever since. We live in Northeast Mesa.
Oh, good. Okay. Good to know. So year round and both those sets. That's perfect. Good to know.
And then Donna asked if we put a hummingbird feeder on the back patio window, which is under a porch, will they be attracted to it?
Back patio under a porch for sure. I mean, that's where I would put it. It's better to be in the shade too. You don't, because in the sun it'll get so hot. I don't know if they can drink it. So it's kind of has to be in the shade.
It's in the shade.
What?
It is in the shade.
Yeah, no. Anywhere in the shade, and for selfish reasons, where I put it is where I can see it out a window, just to watch them better, you know?
Right, and that's what I like to do, but I'm thinking because we have dogs, they might not come underneath there.
Oh, well, you know what? I've seen hummingbirds come down and fly in the face of a dog and fly away.
Oh, really?
They have no fear of anything because they know, I think because they know they can get away. I could never catch one. I'm sure my dog couldn't. So, so I think that shouldn't hurt them. I mean, if the hummingbird feeder was so low, maybe or something, but if it's a couple feet above where your dogs could ever reach, they definitely get. I mean, have you ever been using the hose and they come down? Like whenever I'm watering my plants, they come down and drink out of the hose right in front of 6 inches from my hand.
No, so, I haven't had that happen yet.
Yeah, they definitely have no fear of getting close to danger or whatever. I don't know. I wouldn't worry about that too much. No, the bigger birds, yeah, dogs will scare away like doves and stuff like that. I think that ground feeding birds that are bigger and have more trouble taking off, sometimes the dogs will keep those away, but I wouldn't.
A pink collar on my standard poodle, and they like get right in her face.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Checking out that pink, seeing if it's something interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'll have to try it. So you're saying too, they don't come out a lot in the sun, because I do have another feeder that's more in the sun all the time, and then I get the little finch birds all over my feeder.
Yeah.
Like going after them, and then it's like they scare the hummingbirds away. So I get more.
Well, that'll happen anywhere. Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, anywhere. But the only reason I say not in the sun, I think just because, if it's a glass type feeder or whatever, the sun hitting the glass during the summer anyway would get so hot. I think that they wouldn't, I don't know. I don't have any proof of any of that, but it seems like the jar would get so hot that they wouldn't want to drink out of it.
I have a feeder in the sun all day long, and then the rest of mine are under the patio. And I think the one in the sun, because it's farther away from the patio, is most popular. And I get, the woodpeckers come, I have the verdants come, everything comes to that feeder. Orioles come there when they're here. And that's why I have it way out there. But I do have several under the patio, and I get the ones that don't want to put up with the fuss.
Okay, yeah, because I do usually have a lot out there too, but okay.
That makes sense. The bigger birds would be more afraid of coming up under the porch probably too. So the distance from, but that's good to know, because so I guess the being in the full sun doesn't matter either.
Yeah, and when I change it, when it gets low and I'll go to change it, that food is like you said, it's very hot. It's like, how do they take that?
Huh, but they
It
don't
doesn't
care.
seem
Huh?
to bother them. I don't know. It's amazing.
I'm learning all kinds. I need to get a pen. I'm learning all kinds of stuff today.
Take your own notes.
Yeah, that's right. No, that's why I love these interactions, you know. It's just there's always more information. And like I say, my expertise is kind of in the plants and not as much in the birds, but I love birds. A lot of my family has been birders, and I'd go on hikes with them, but I would, that I haven't learned as much as I would love to. So it's good information. Any other questions, comments, shares?
No, very interesting as usual.
Yep, very interesting. Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks everybody for coming.
Excellent. Thanks so much.
Yeah, next week is pruning.
Yes.
Right?
Can't wait to get that one either.
Yeah, that one's gonna be a little more. I'm gonna work. This week's job for me is to figure out the setup where I can kind of show you guys some examples too. So I'm gonna figure it out where we can do some demonstrations and things instead of just sitting here in front of the computer and doing a PowerPoint. There'll be a little bit of that, but there'll also be some demonstrations on real stuff, and so hopefully it'll be a good experience too. Fun.
I pruned this week. I don't even know what the name of the plant was or the tree, but nothing died this year in my yard. I've only been here 6 months and nothing has died in this horrible summer. So I think I'm doing pretty good.
You're doing good, and you must have plants that are adapted to our climate.
Well, the yard was fabulous when we bought the house. I mean, unbelievable. But you have the dead things and the ones that cross over. So I kind of did a pruning on a tree today, and I don't know if it's the right time, but it got pruned anyway.
It's a good time for most trees, yeah. It's good weather. So yeah, next week we'll talk a lot more about it, and I'm sure you did a good job, but for the next one, you'll be able to be an expert.
Yeah, good.
Excellent. So in the chat, we just have more thank yous, and it's been very informative.
Oh, thank you, Katie.
So, all right. I will be sending out an email with the survey. Jonathan's mentioned aloes in pots, so remember that for the survey. And huh?
Can we give more hints about that?
I like the pot. Yeah. I like the pot idea.
yeah, good. Yep.
Excellent. We'll see you next week.
See you next week. Thanks, Jonathan and Katie.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Great.
Bye-bye.